Yeah, we're live. Checking my new shirt. My wife got it for me today. I think that's a double meaning. I'm not sure. But that was awesome of her to be thinking of us while she's out. Uh, Sugar Daddy. It's pretty awesome. So, how's everybody doing? Hopefully, I think it's Monday. That's why I put up. I'm pretty sure it's Monday. Sometimes the days go by, but I just posted a video right before I got on the live feed with a test that I did running a set of stock E7TE heads. The only modifications we did to them that I did to them was put valve springs on them so we could run lots and lots of camshaft with them, because the factory heads, obviously, you're not going to be able to do that. So, and the reason that I did that is because we ran that same set of cylinder heads on a 306, a board over 5 liter. We ran on a 333 stroker, which is a 3.25 stroke and a 40 over 4040 more, and then we ran it on a 393 or 392, depending on which way you're rounding when you're doing the math. 4030 by 385, yeah, 3.85 on the stroke, and that one originally came from the guys from Ford Racing, and that was really, for me, that the other ones were good. I like running stock heads as a baseline for all the other stuff, because in this particular in this particular instance, it allowed me to compare stock head flow versus and power, because we flow tested all the heads to compare what that power output was versus other different heads on that 306, and then also on the 333. What I wanted to do is step things up a little bit. Way back when they did all that cylinder head testing, we wanted to step things up on that combination a bit. I wish I kind of would have gone a little bit further on that one, but we want to set things up a bit because the heads that we were putting on there flowed more. And we'll get into the power and airflow formula in just a second. But as you'll see, a lot of these heads had way more airflow and way more power potential than we were using on our combinations. But the interesting thing is, because we put, and I also ran stock heads as the baseline on the 393 stroker, which, given the power level and the camshaft and all the things that we were running on that combination, it had a good size, a decent sized roller cam, and it had a single plane intake manifold. It had a big carburetor. It had lots of displacement. It's not the combination that you would put on that, but it is for that reason that the cylinder heads did so well, and we had a fairly high specific output in terms of horsepower relative to the airflow offered by the cylinder heads. And so we'll get into all that. So the E7TE heads, when I flowed them, I put 160 CFM as the number. I think it was plus or minus on either side of that, but 160 just made the math a lot easier. So what I did was we used 160 as the flow number for the intake, and the formula for determining how much power your heads could support. A really good idea, really good basic idea, is that if you take the peak flow number, in this case 160 CFM, and you multiply it by 2, that'll give you a pretty good idea on how much power they would support on any kind of fairly healthy application. Because here's the problem, and we saw this, and that's why I did the test that I did, and that's why I did this video, to illustrate exactly this point. So we ran these heads on the 306. It had a small camshaft in it, a Comp 264 cam. It had a dual plane intake, a 650 Speed Demon, I think. It had headers on it. And then when we ran the stock heads, this thing made like right at 1 horsepower per cubic inch. It was a 306, and it made 306 horsepower. If you take the airflow and divide it by, or take the power output and divide it by the airflow, we see that that combination made about 1.91 horsepower per CFM. So we didn't quite get to that double number with that combination, primarily because that combination is pretty mild. I mean, the cylinder head flow is not the only reason that thing didn't make enough power. When we put another head on it, we're getting 385, 390, going up toward 400 horsepower with the right kind of cylinder head. So an aftermarket head, made a big difference, as you would expect. But it also had a lot more potential, because we had heads that flowed 250 CFM that would support 500 horsepower using that formula, and we didn't make anywhere near that. But that might be a discussion for another day. And now, why don't you continue with that formula once you put the good head on? And I'll tell you all the things that it takes to actually continue and make that happen. So we ran the stock head on there, and it made 1 horsepower per cubic inch, and it made 1.91 horsepower per CFM. So we made 306 horsepower out of 160 CFM. We took the same heads off because they were already prepped, and what I did was we just made sure that we had enough valve spring to run 600 plus lift cams on them. So I just put them on the 333, which was the 4030 bore, and then the 325 stroke. We ran a 274 extreme energy cam, a little bit bigger, 224, 232, and mid 500s, 555, 565. Again, we had a dual plane intake manifold. I think we either had a 650 or 750. I think we might have had a 750 on that one. Again, long tube headers. But now with the stock head, same head that we just ran on the 306, now the combination made 452 or 352 horsepower. So the stroker allowed the combination push the power output higher, 352 horsepower as opposed to 306 with the 306 motor. So the stroker is now making more than 1 horsepower per cubic inch. So 352 horsepower out of 333 cubic inches. If we look at the airflow, is now making 352 horsepower with that same 160 CFM. So that equates to 2.2 horsepower per CFM, which is a pretty good number. That's now the combination of displacement and RPM and cam timing, intake manifold was fairly similar. Now that combination is putting more of that airflow, or essentially almost all of it, to use now with that combination. So now it's making lots of horsepower relative to the airflow. Again, when we put a decent head on it, it made a lot more power. I think that the power went up from 352 to 438. So we're talking about some fairly sizable. This was like 85 horsepower or 86 horsepower or something. So it picked up a lot from just the head. Again, because we're creating a situation where the last thing that this thing needs, like an LS motor with a cam in it, is the last thing it needs is a cylinder head. So on the Ford, that's really the case. It's really lacking in head flow. So when you give it that, because it has all the other things, when you artificially give it the camshaft and the intake manifold, and then you give it the cylinder head, the last thing that you give it is going to make a big difference. And we saw that even more so when we took those heads off and put them on our 393. So we put them on a 393. It had a pretty good size cam. It had a solid roller, but it was a street roller. It was like 600 plus lift, 248, 250, 450, 110. Again, it was a 393 cubic inches. We had a single plane Victor Jr. intake manifold. We had a 950 Holly. We had 1 3/4 headers. So it had, again, this situation was needed cylinder heads even more than the other ones did. So when we ran the stock heads, again, 160 CFM, this thing made 387 horsepower. With a stock head, which is the most I've seen, and maybe I haven't done an exhaustive enough search, but I don't know that you go much beyond that. Like maybe if we put a 427 together or something and did something silly and ran the stock heads on it. But if you do the formula, plug that into the formula, you have 387 horsepower and 160 CFM. That's now 2.4, a little over 2.4 horsepower per CFM. You're getting into really serious numbers now. And the reason is not that we haven't made the head any more efficient or done anything. What we've done is the bigger motor with the camshaft and the intake manifold and all that stuff now just has much more draw on the head. So we have kind of artificially increased the flow rate of the head by having more suction on the bottom side of the head, basically. It'd be the same if we could figure out what the vacuum was present. I don't remember. I'll have to look at the data and see if that's there. I don't think that it is. But if we could see what depression we had, we could try to simulate that on the flow bench and see what the change in airflow is, with more suction basically on the head, to see if we could get it to flow more air by changing the depression. And it might. And that's kind of what we're seeing, is that's why it's able to make more power. So we've made it more efficient by, again, going to the extreme level of having everything else be the right thing except for the head. And then when we put like the airflow research head on, and we put a set of 205s on there, it went from 386 or 387 horsepower up to 555. So it picked up 168 horsepower just from a head swap. So does that mean every time you put a cylinder head on, it's going to add 168 horsepower? No, obviously not. But when you create the situation and then, you create the problem and then cure the problem, then obviously you kind of look like a hero. But it does show you how restrictive these things can be on some of these combinations. And the 5-liter forward head in particular is notorious for not, 160 CFM. It's not going to support a lot of power, even when we do something ridiculous and put it on a giant-sized motor. The thing made decent torque, 456 foot-pounds. But the thing is, with the good head on it, it also made lots more. It made lots more power, and it made lots more torque everywhere. The little head didn't help it make torque down low. I didn't run it at 1500 RPM, but I can almost guarantee you that that's still not going to be the case, because it made 456 foot-pounds versus 515 with a better head on it. And in no case did the stock head make more horsepower and torque compared to the aftermarket head. We did see a little bit of a change way down low from some of the heads, and this would be more of an issue on the smaller motor, like doing a head upgrade with a mild camshaft on a 306. You're more likely to trade some power down low than you would on the stroker or on the bigger stroker, because they can take advantage of all that airflow, and you're probably not going to get that loss. The stock head starts becoming restrictive almost immediately in these situations. But let me know if you guys have ever seen any combinations, or have heard of, or ever built any using a stock unported head. Like I said, there was nothing done to this. There's no trick valve job, no nothing. It was just a stock head that had a valve spring upgrade on it. I think we ended up putting guide plates or something on it too. No, not guide plates, maybe just rocker studs, because we did run roller rockers on it. But we did nothing to the ports or the chambers or the valve job or anything. It was just the way that it had come. And those poor heads had been run on lots of stuff as kind of the baseline head, because it's nice when they're already set up. We don't have to get another set of junkyard heads and go through the process of respringing it for whatever kind of camshaft that we want to put in it. So those are always, I would take those off and just set them over in a special spot over in this little corner, because even though, after you put a set of trick flow heads or airflow research or some other kind of head on there, you're like, oh yeah, I just want to throw these in the garbage. I better not, because I'm probably going to be using these for another baseline sometime. So we set those aside and make sure that we still have those around. So, and that brings me to my next point, is that, and this is going to be our poll for tonight. So I'll go ahead and get that up there now. After dealing with iron heads, and actually iron small block forward heads are probably the best ones to deal with because they're so light, but there shouldn't be any iron heads anymore. Should every production head now be made of lightweight aluminum? Should the OEMs only make aluminum heads and not iron heads? So should everything be made out of aluminum? We'll put that poll up and see what happens. I'm going to guess like 80, because I'm going to guess that the other 20 are always going to be the other 20. Aaron, so we'll get to questions that you guys have. Aaron, is there a formula to determine the optimal port size airflow based on cubic inches? No, because as we saw, well, we didn't see that in this instance, but we could take the cubic inches. If we had that 306, if I put more camshaft in it and more cylinder head, more intake or whatever, we could get a 306 to not make 300 horsepower. We could get it to make 400 or even 500 horsepower, depending on the things that we put to it. So it would never be based on displacement. It would be based on power output. Richard, can I run 100 shot on my 347 blueprint motor? Yes. Can you do a typical Big Bang 4.8 or 5.3 build, but using off-brand parts? I don't know what you mean by that. eBay cam, Amazon head studs, pop metal crank pulley. It'd be fun to see what blows up first. Well, given the fact that the stock stuff doesn't blow up till we make a lot of power, an eBay cam is not going to hurt anything. So it would be just like the Big Bang that we already did, except maybe for the cylinder heads. Iron head still in place in the diesel and marine applications. That's probably a good point. And also Eric mentioned that aluminum heads also weight savings because, and that's why we're talking about not wanting to pick up these iron heads. And also it's a benefit for handling and braking and acceleration. Yes, as in cubic inches. No, I don't use that for cubic inches because the same reason that I don't use the formula for carburation for cubic inches either. I do it I base the carburetor size on the power needs of the motor. Is the Cobra production block any different than the GT? I don't think that it is. For truck, iron heads make sense. They have better heat retentions. They make better power compared to similar aluminum heads. Most will never be modified, so they make sense. I don't agree that an iron head makes more power than an aluminum head. Is the Cobra production block any different? No. Does airflow in the heads act the same with boost pressure like using a roots blower as being NA, pushed in, pulled out? I don't really know what your question is. I think you're thinking about it. You're going about your thought process in the wrong way. When you're thinking about boost, you should think about whatever the thing is doing NA, and then you should think about boost as adding to that. Not that it's changing the flow dynamics of the cylinder head or anything. Just look at it as a multiplier. GT40s are like cheap at the wrecking yard. Yep. I put twin junkyard turbos on a stock junkyard 351 and a Pinto. Ran 1140s at 124 with 6 pounds. Yeah, the boost is an amazing thing. It doesn't really take very much to make a big difference. The guys at Engine Masters have tried to test this iron head aluminum head thing, but they can never find a good combination where the head is actually the same, where the head is identical. If I already guessed, I'd said aluminum 302 be under 400 pounds. Starting to tune my LS1 with a Vortec, I'm pretty sure I'm at 5 pounds of 6,400. So is it just too big of a pulley on there, or is it belt slip? But that's a good place to start. You want to start at low boost and then get that right, and then go up and boost. Eight into one headers are great for boost. Have you tested that? Do you really know that that's the case? An 8 into 1 header sounds really good, but I don't necessarily think that it's going to be better for boost. I don't think it's going to be better NA either, but I don't know. I haven't tested that. When would a T4 125 AR with a 96 millimeter issue on a 10.35? I don't understand your question. Just tell me how much power you want to make and tell me what the NA power is, and then we can tell you if that turbo is going to work for it. Isn't there a Mopar aluminum head that's a direct copy of an iron head for OEM look? I don't know. I'm not a Mopar guy, so I don't know which one that would be. Dan, I know what all the theories are about iron heads and aluminum heads. I've read about this for decades now, but I've just never seen anybody be able to show me a test where that actually happens. And if it made more power, why wouldn't people be doing it? Big pulley is supposed to be 8-ish PSI with a stock engine on head cam and intake. Oh, so that's doing what it's supposed to then. That's even better because now you're making more power at less boost. So don't worry about that number. Worry about the important number, and that's the horsepower. 8-into-1 headers. We can't even run. I haven't figured out a way to run one of those on the dyno unless we aim the headers forward, maybe. And then I'd have to wrap the exhaust around and aim it backwards. Tim, aluminum heads don't last as long in demolition derbies. And do you want also maybe you want the extra weight on it with the iron heads? Seattle's in the house. Supercharger versus a turbo, same exact engine. Would the boost curves be similar? Well, lucky for you, I have videos up where we ran a centrifugal, a roots, a twin screw, and turbos all on the same motor, and you can go take a look. And the answer is no, the curves won't look at all similar. Racer, when you speak of horsepower from a certain airflow number, what valve lift do you check it out? Well, I just make it easy. I pick the maximum flow rate at whatever valve lift that is. I think in this case it was 550 on the stock head, if I remember right. In your opinion, do you think 450 horsepower on a 2,800-pound daily drive would be fast? Yes, it would. It would be like a 450 horsepower 280Z, and that is fast. And then if it's not fast enough, then you put a 100-shot on it. So where are we at on our poll here? It's still 70-30. So there's 30% of the people that think that there should still be iron heads. Spectre said their 482 Cadillac made 1,700 horsepower at 20 pounds. So let's see if we can. That seems like a lot. Times 1.5. That means that their NA 482 made 700 horsepower. Maybe a Cadillac would do that. I thought that the Spectre stuff was that their NA motors were kind of stockish. Unless Courtney did stuff for them and put his aluminum heads and things like that on there. When they ran 415 miles an hour at 29 pounds, how much horsepower was that going from 1,700 at 20 psi to 29 psi? I don't know. I don't know what they were doing, and how much of that were they putting down. How much of it was, how much slippage was there? There's a lot of things to consider on a streamliner like that out of Bonneville. Dear Ed, Rob, Richard, please keep the Ford content coming. I do everything, man. Richard, any thought on ring gap orientation? The internet is all over. Goldie's Garage. What I want to do is, and I'm going to suggest this to Freiberger. I want him to do or I could do it. I want to do a ring test. I want to take a head off, mark the orientation of the ring gaps on both the first and second ring, and then just put it back together and run the motor for a little bit, half an hour, whatever, and then take it back apart and then see if the ring gap has moved. So see if the ring gap is moving around. So if the ring gap is moving around, that tells us that wherever you put it, it's not stationary. It doesn't just stay there. So really, since it's going to move around, does it matter where you put it? That's the kind of thing, that's the test that I want to do. Yeah, Dan, iron heads when they really hate their cylinder head porter. I know. I felt bad sending those 3,800 heads up to Turbo Monza. One of the guys in the four-wheel drive clubs races Scouts. He built the 304 Turtle IH motor that has been bored. A fit Cadillac 500 pistons. Very cool. Worked heads, custom intake, makes 400 and 400. That's a good combination then. That's a good combination out of a 300-inch motor. Forgive me for living under a rock, but what happened to the Barrett? We may be revisiting that. It had a nicely supported 990 big block Chevy heads and switched to Pro Max 317s. It only picked up a 10th in the quarter, guessing that was from weight. So you had stock 990s? Or, oh, they reported 990s. Okay, so maybe they did a really good job on those 990 heads. Kurt, who had iron heads that made enough to support 800 horsepower? Is that a big block? Did I miss something else? Texas Road Warrior Richard, I'm running a stock long block 30T GT40 intake, 10 psi, 70 millimeter turbo. The car runs great, but I'm curious to see what you recommend for timing with E7s with boost. It's going to be a function of a lot of things, not just those heads. I think that those E7 heads, I want to say that they wanted like 35 or 36 or 37 degrees. I have to go back and look when they were NA. So then we would just start taking away from there. How does boost affect your horsepower? It's not a CFM thing. I use it as 14.7 pounds of boost doubles your power output. We ran an XR288HR and a Vortec motor out of a 98 Z71. Went to a 98 716. 97 springs, carbon intake, and went 740s in a street Mustang. Nice. So the rings do not stay still then. So then does it matter when we're building a motor and putting it together where we line the rings up? I mean, I would still feel conscientious enough to not make the gaps in the same spot. But if we put them in, it's not really going to make a difference, right? Yeah, the two-stroke stuff is important. They just don't want to catch the ring. Talk to Bob Glidden. I don't have him on my phone list. Making 800 horsepower with stock iron heads. A stock iron big block head? So I've seen people get those to flow not 400, but in the mid to high 300s, which would be enough to, if you were at 2.2 or 2.3, which a pro stock motor even back then certainly was. Do E6 SE heads really produce much more torque than an E7 or a GT40? What is an E6? What head is that? If it's a production Ford head, a production small block Ford head, it probably doesn't do better than a GT40 head. Oh, Cameron, you're pouring through a 1/16 of an inch of rust. That's not good. But just think of all the material taken away and how much more they're going to flow. Iron LS heads, like the early 6-liter heads, the 317 copies. I don't even know what the casting number is on those. Plus LS4 intake manifold sounds good. Sounds like a good combination. And then what you'll want to do is put that on a 4.8. Then it'll be all the torque. An 86 Mustang head is not going to be very good, and it's not going to make more torque, I don't think, than a GT40 head. I haven't done that specific test, but I can almost guarantee that. You ever get surprised by an engine's performance, like or out or underperforms your expectations? Yes, that happens quite a bit. A good example is the first Big Bang motor. We had no idea it was going to go that far before we we were trying to hurt something. We had no idea it was going to say, well, no, that's not happening today. Oh, Glidden's heads were 351 Cleveland's. Okay. I haven't seen a 351 Cleveland head flow what a big block Chevy, a ported big block Chevy head does, though. So, Dan, I think offsetting the rings is something we do to make ourselves feel better. I'm kind of leaning toward that, too. I think Molly says the rings can spit something like 20 to 30 RPM. Wow. Spinning's caused by the crosshatch. It would make sense. To recommend ram air, anyone on an NA application? Yes, I would more recommend cold air. Actually getting ram air where you're getting positive pressure going into some kind of intake manifold is difficult. But getting cold air is not difficult. The one exception is if you have the cowl induction like they have had on some of the OEM applications. If you can talk to Bob Glidden, let me know. He passed away in 2017. Yeah, that was a while ago. Yeah, I know that the 86 heads do not have a stellar reputation. Yeah, 350 is kind of the number that I was thinking on the Cleveland heads, Dan. I've seen people do that. But 800 horsepower out of 350 CFM that's a little bit of a chore. Richard, not sure if you saw my post earlier. I got back from Rocky Mountain Raceway, and there's a Mustang with a 589 big block. Oh, a Block X. Nice. That's cool. That's a big boy. They would all spin equal. I don't know that they will. I don't know that the load on the ring imposed by the crosshatch would be the same on the top and second ring. Didn't the 1300 5.3 Big Bang only break a rocker? No, it actually broke a. No, we scuffed a piston on that one, I think. Richard, what do you think about the question tonight? Well, I don't think that there should ever be any iron heads ever on anything. I think that everything should be aluminum just because I don't want to lift them up. And I think that aluminum dissipates heat better. It's better for detonation control. I think it's better in every way possible. How close to the 69 351 Windsor 4-barrel heads compared to the GT40 heads as far as airflow? I think that the GT40 heads are better. I actually haven't seen a real honest evaluation on both of those heads, like on the airflow bench and then on the dyno. I think it's pretty hard to find 69 351 Windsor heads anymore. Back in the day, they were kind of the go-to thing, and they were available. Now you can find lots of GT40 stuff, but I think finding a 69 casting is probably harder now. Yeah, piston rock might have an influence on movement. Yeah, Dan, that's a good point. I have a 71 Mustang with a functioning NASA-style Mach 1 hood scoop, so it has a NACA duct on it. Do they really do anything, or just cooler air? You can measure that. You could put a Type K thermocouple on it and see what the temperature is under the hood while you're driving, and then you could just tape those up, which would be very easy, and see what happens. Anthony, I don't know what video you're asking about. You say no to iron heads, but what about no? An iron FE intake would be even worse than an iron head. I think of the two of those, I'd rather lift up iron FE heads than an iron FE intake manifold. I don't think rings move much once seated. The old engine cylinders all had some ovality. See, that's the thing, that we get differences of opinion, and that's great. That's what I want. That's why I want to do the test. I just want to mark it, run it, and see what happens. The one place cast iron is better in loss factor, vibration dampening. It does have a different frequency, but the iron block is enough. Then what about aluminum blocks, though? I do like aluminum LS blocks, but I do really like this L83. I'll tell you what I like is I just had to put a Pontiac in my truck today with my son and the engine hoist, and it's obviously all iron. And then moving that around either on the engine hoist or on an engine stand versus moving an aluminum 5.3 on an engine stand, you can almost push it and it just glides away with the aluminum motor. But on these iron motors, and a big block is terrible, especially on a tripod thing, on the tripod Allied or Harbor Freight engine stands. It's kind of an iffy situation. If you're trying to roll it and you get up some momentum and you catch a rock under the steel casters, it's not good. I have for a long time wanted to do caster upgrades on a lot of my stands. Just put something big off-road tires on it so it rolls nice and we'll go over stuff like that. Richard, do you mean aluminum for passenger cars and light trucks or other stuff too? I don't want to work on them for anything, but I only work on them for cars and trucks. But honestly, if I had a boat, I might have iron heads on it. The next big aluminum big bang motor you done? I've never done a big bang on an aluminum motor. I've only ever done iron motors. Do you think you could measure the bores before testing and after the testing or failure? I believe the aluminum motors have more sleeve movement. That wouldn't surprise me. Although given particularly on the LS, that L33 and the LC9 and those kinds of variants, given because I haven't done it, but given what the drag racers are doing with them, they're making as much or more power than I've ever made on the engine dyno with stuff that they're doing at the drag strip and running them. I haven't had any of those guys talk to me about sleeve movement, but it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, FE intakes make up half the heads. That's why we'd rather lift the head out. Should have an Ironman competition so who can throw an FE intake the furthest. They tried to, but everybody died. On the aluminum blocks, you want to do a partial fill for handling the vibration. Any use for iron blocks with modern metallurgy? Huge horsepower can use billet blocks, don't they? Yeah, like Mahovitz has the billet blocks for the modular stuff. T, just swapping to an aluminum intake and aluminum water pump and putting some stainless headers, I pulled almost 150 pounds off the front of my Cutlass. It's a lot. If our 185s on an NA 408 and a lightweight car too small, well, how much does the 408 make? That's what I would ask. A 185 head will support 600 horsepower. If everyone pulling pistons from a junkyard notes gap position, we can start collecting stats. But we don't know what the beginning part is. We don't know where Chevy puts them in unless they all follow the same specs from the factory. It'd be interesting to know when they install them, if they go in a particular orientation. Try moving the engine stands in the stone driveway. I do. I had the driveway that I had is all full of gravel and stuff, so it was no picnic. Billet blocks use aftermarket sleeves. 185s on a 408, 529. Yep, they'll support that power. For marine, industrial, heavy equipment, iron seems to make more sense. Have you ever used blue jean stripes to polish a crankshaft? I've never polished a crank. So that would be a no. If you have a poor flowing head, just add boost. The stock 5-liter head, we've run those with boost, and that they will take boost. It's just that you're multiplying a fairly low number, so you don't make big power when you're doing it. Is it a myth, or do aluminum heads help reduce detonation compared to the iron heads? Well, that's one of the discussions, is that an iron head should make more power if that's true about aluminum. If aluminum is less susceptible to detonation, if it takes heat away, I think it does. For me, I think it does more than that. But if that's the case, then those two things theoretically should go together, right? Next, there you go, Mike. Next motor you put together, I'm not clocking the rings. I'm just putting them in. How much will an AFR 165 head support? Take a look at Airflow Research and see what the flow number that they give you. I think that those are probably 250 or 260 cc's or something, or 250 or 60 CFM. They might be even more than that. Just double whatever the peak number is, and that's kind of what it'll support. It'll support more than that if you put it on lots of motor. But can a VSR billet S480 T4 get a 3,600 pound car in the 8s? I don't know about the 3,600 pound. That turbo should go 1,200 flywheel. And so I think that that's enough to go in the 8s. I just don't know about, I don't have my slide rule for 3,600 pounds. I'm glad you mentioned boat with freshwater cooling, closed system with antifreeze. Do you think an Edelbrock Performer RPM 210 head will pick up prop speed on an Explorer 5 liter with the 715 Holly? Do you have camshaft to take advantage of that? If you're just doing a head upgrade with a stock cam, I don't know that you're going to pick up a lot of power. What's your favorite old school small block Chevy combo? I think the favorite small block that I ran was the Fuelie motor, just because I had never run one. It was kind of cool. Is a stock big block Chevy oil pump good for under 6,000? You don't need a high volume pump. A stock pump's fine. Fascist. I would hope that they do. I would hope that they have a procedure that lines all of them up and they put them in all the same. But if our discussion is any indication, maybe they don't care. Maybe they go together and they run on their like LPG or propane or whatever they're running them on, and then to break them in, and then they send them out, and then they're fine. I know, an off-road cherry picker. I kind of want to do that. I do at least want to upgrade the casters, but now that we're like, because like the ones at the ones that they let you borrow at the pick-a-parts have regular like car tires on them in the back, but the front has the little steel wheels and it's triangular so that it will go under stuff. But it would be better on a either the cherry picker, or even I would want to do it on a, I could do a hot rod engine stand that would wheel around. Just put some, serious meats on it. Richard, have you tested speed, mass, or crankshaft in the past? I have run some of their stuff. Yeah, I don't know about recently, but I have run some of their stuff. Aluminum. The Naughty 218, 488, and a Performer RPM in a boat. Is that in a 5 liter? I think that cam will work with the wet exhaust. I've used a shoestring and different grits of sandpaper. I've seen that where you just loop it around. I just have never done it personally. Was the English equivalent of Chuck Norris? I want to turbocharge my V6 Toyota, but the local shop wanted to charge me 10 grand. You should be able to do it for a lot less than that. The thing that I would worry about, all the other stuff is very easy. All you have to do is use your stock exhaust manifolds, run a Y pipe, connect those two, mount the turbo somewhere wherever it'll fit, make sure you have room for your exhaust and the discharge, put an intercooler on it, put bigger injectors on it. Then the tuning is the thing that I don't know about on that application. Mike, yeah, they do have good pricing on some of that stuff. Just make sure that everything is right before you put them together. Like, I'm not worried about the metallurgy part of it, just the machining and the length and all that. Make sure that all the critical parts are very important. James Bond is the equivalent of Chuck Norris. The 185 only flows 260. How lean can the AFR be? Well, you can keep leaning it out under cruise with no load until it misfires. And then you have to resort to, which is like what my Honda did and other applications, you have to resort to swirl or mixer motion to try to get that the mixture a little bit more homogeneous so it'll burn better. Sometimes you might have to go down and plug gap, put more spark energy in it. Somebody was asking about Richard, do you think you could ever test a 302 and add a 331 kit, everything the same but the stroker kit? So you just want to change the displacement and the compression because you're going to change both of those things when you put the stroker kit in. Lucky for you, I think I have done that, but we did it with a 347 because I ran a 347 with stock heads and camshaft for one of the tests that I did, and we also ran a 302. A 347 with a stock cam is not, or any kind of stroker with a stock cam is, and stock heads is not a very good combination. That's all you got to do is take a look at it. Get the Harry Surveyor eyeball. Yeah, Dan, I don't think Bond goes as far nowadays. Oh, Jason Statham. That's good. That's right. And he's the real deal. He actually is a martial arts expert. I mean, he's no Nick Cage, but actually, I like Jason Statham. I think he's awesome. I've never heard of the cast AFR heads that are the China competition, not the. Oh, so they're not CNC 185s. You're talking about the enforcer heads. Okay, so the enforcer heads are flow less. Can't you do an HB 302 then multiply it by 331? Not really, because you're probably not going to make the same specific output with the bigger motor because the camshaft effectively becomes milder in the bigger motor, and the head flow, I know this is going to sound weird, kind of goes down with the bigger motor. It becomes more restrictive. So I doubt that you would make the same specific output with those two if you saddled them with the same stock heads and stock camshaft. The FR Enforcer, yeah, that's what we were talking about. Will LQ9 with forged pistons and rods with a stock crank be good for 1,000 wheel horsepower? Yes. In fact, the stock stuff will be good for that. Stock rods and pistons, especially if they're Gen 4 stuff and you have ring gap in it. But with rods and pistons, it'll definitely do that. Yeah, Daniel, that's a good point. That you doubt that the two-stroke guys would have gone to the trouble and expense of pinning rings for position unless they were moving. I bolted the business end of my cherry picker to the forks of an old forklift. That's a good idea. So you have 260 CFM heads making 760 horsepower. That seems like a lot. .363 is a short. Yeah, the 363 is the 8.2 deck. You can make a 363 out of a 351 also, but the ones that you normally see are the 4125 bore and the 3400 strokes. We had one of those that was a Dart SHB short block. It works really good. Yeah, an anti-gravity gun would be really good. Although still, that might not want to lift iron heads though. Friend of mine here has a 393 small block Ford. I like those strokers. That we made hundreds and hundreds of runs with the stroker that Ford Racing gave the guys at Westech a long time ago. Runs 490s on NITROUS. Nice. Guys on Power Nation did a test with a 5.9 Magnum to a 408 with all the stock stuff, stock cam and stock heads and stock intake and stuff. Just because super stockers can do it doesn't mean that it's possible. What are your thoughts on Ford letter cams? I ran a 331 with an X cam with 7 pounds of boost. Not sure what the horsepower was, but my 65 Mustang was fun. Well, then it's a win. That's as long if you're happy with it, then you're happy with it. I don't. Those aren't the best cams because most of them are single pattern cams, but it doesn't matter. It did the job, and we all ran them back in the day. 408 with enforcer heads and trick flow stage 3 cams. Is that a good combo? Yeah, I think if those heads only flow 260, they might be a little bit limiting on a 408, depending on how much kind of power you're trying to make. Alien versus Predator. Yeah, those are good. You better tell Patterson Racing Engines you cannot do that. I don't know who that is. I don't know who that's directed toward. Well, they ran in the manner you do, you know, headers and carb and intake. I don't know what the link thing is. I still index rings. I do too. Every one that I put together gets oriented. You want them to rotate. You want them to stay in line and dance 180 degree apart. I don't know if they do that. And it would be kind of hard, I think, to have a camera in there so that you could watch that, but it would be awesome to be able to see it. Oh, I was talking about the induction system on the 408K. They ran it with a carburetor and stuff. So, Mike, you just set them by grit content without indexing the ring. Yeah, have cameras in the bore would be cool. You need the super ring cam. You need the ring like we have. We had some more skunk action in the backyard. I saw one the other night, just walking around. So I'll post with a 460 base pulling motor breaking rod ends. Did he break the ARP bolts, or did the rod break? 500 grit, 1,000 grit, 200 grit. Yeah, but is it true grit? Racer, nobody here has ever said that they didn't do that. Nobody's disagreeing with you. I just said that seems like a lot. I think the skunks are awesome as long as they don't spray the dogs. Ever test Edelbrock E205 heads? I don't think I have. The E Street heads, I don't think I've run those, but I know somebody has at West Tech or Freiberger or one of those guys from the back when they were doing the magazine stuff. I'm sure that they have. Yeah, Link, that's what happens when you run those bigger motors with stock heads and stock camshafts is and because this is the way that it is with the stock stuff anyway, the torque number usually is much bigger than the horsepower number. We get what I call the tune port combination where it makes 250 horsepower but 350 foot-pounds, and then that gets exaggerated even more with the stroker stuff. Oh, that would be a good idea, Dan. I watched a video years ago of rings moving in a running one-cylinder development engine. They used radioactive paint on the backside of the ring and used an X-ray camera. That would be a good way to do it. That's thinking outside the box. Watch your Big Bang videos, but do you think I'll be risking my LQ9 with a stock bottom end at 900 wheel horsepower? Should I just upgrade the rods and pistons? That's your call. I mean, we made, I don't know, 90 or 70 or 80 pulls at the 1,000 horsepower mark. It was 1,000 flywheel horsepower, and lots of them were more than that, but at least that number. And we made lots of pulls on it. I don't know how that equates to what's happening in terms of damage potential. I don't know how that compares to running it at the track. The run that we're taking, the sweep that we're doing, takes longer than a 900 wheel horsepower drag race pass is going to take. The sweep on the dyno takes longer than that. So the thing's under load longer than that, but it's not going through RPM and shifting and doing that sort of thing. So I don't know how that equates. There's lots of guys out running that power level with stock bottom ends and ring gap. I just don't know. I haven't talked to all of them to find out, how many passes they're getting, how many years they're getting. Are they only getting 1 week? I don't think they're getting 1 weekend. I think guys are getting a long time out of them if they're tuned properly. I had a pet skunk. Did you? That's cool. I know people have had them. I think Mark Sanchez had one. I know my male dog, Milo, I have 2 golden retrievers. Milo has already been sprayed twice. He's been sprayed once here and then once when we were up camping because he sleeps with me out in the tent. And then he got up and went carousing and found a little striped kitty. How do I set my rockers to top dead center? Well, the rockers are not going to be at top dead center. The piston's going to be at top dead center. In high school, we had a Briggs & Stratton engine with a clear something or other, with a clear cylinder that ran on alcohol. That's cool. It's cool to see that stuff. Like there's a couple of videos up there like that where they put the clear cylinder head on it. Any recommendations on controlling variable runner? Well, you have to look how the OEMs are doing it. But a lot of times they do it with, like, if you look at Ford's got some ways to do it like they're doing on the Aviator, that they did on the Aviator motor. And also the late model Hemis have that as well. A lot of times it's just 1 length or 2 lengths. And so then all you need is, like, they have actuators and it's pretty simple. Mike, 2 S475s could put you near 2,000 horsepower. Enthusiasts, have you ever done a small block 4302 high RPM build? Yeah, there's an 8,000 RPM build up on the channel already. 8,000 RPM small block displacement. Yeah, it was a 30. I think it was a 347. Like in touring car race series, but on a budget. There's no 8,000 RPM stuff on a budget. Embed magnets in the second oil ring. I don't really care if the oil ring is rotating. I only want to see if the first and second rings rotate, because the oil ring we just put that in. Tom, a bit off topic. There's no topics here. In fact, we're going to close out our poll because it's time to get going. 78% saying yes, that every production head should now be made of aluminum, and 22% saying no. It's pretty close on my guess of 80%. On your 462 valve, I have 462 valve, a lot of 462 valve videos up on how to put cams or putting cams in it. What happens when in fact, I tested all of the available comp cams that they had at the time, ported heads, different intake manifolds, boost. There's lots of ways to go fast with that. Yeah, it goes to 11. It takes a lot to get all of that skunk smell off of them. It's still not off of Milo, because usually they get sprayed in the face, because they always lead with that. The collies that I had, the male got bit by a black widow right on the lip, because that's, they lead with their nose and stuff. Richard, do you think Chevrolet will sell the Z06 flat plane crank as parts? I don't know if they'll offer that. I have zero interest in putting a flat plane crank in anything. I've already owned one of those motors, a flat plane crank motor, and I liked it, but I liked it when they had done all of the development on it. Mike, thank you very much. What's the biggest displacement small block you run on a stock tune port injection? A 383 was the only one that we've put on that TPI stuff. What's the difference between an XE cam and a Magnum cam? They have the same 50 enlist, but have different durations. Actually, Extreme Energy cam is going to be a dual pattern cam. A Magnum cam is going to be a single pattern cam. And then the ramp rates are going to be different. The lifts are normally going to be different between a Extreme Energy and a Magnum cam also, because that's part of why the ramp rate's different. I don't have a favorite engine and family. I'm not a Chevy guy or a Ford guy. I'm just a guy. Your dog keeps eating bees. Yeah, you want to chase them. My dog's like chasing lizards. Richard, we want what is it? 10,000 or 100,000? 10,000 RPM, 5,000 horsepower, flat crane, big bang, 5.3. But you forgot the on a budget. You got to put the on the budget thing always. Is going to put an LS head on a small block Ford? I have not. You will have to have a custom cam done. I just want whatever it is to make more power and to demonstrate that to people. No ring gap on a budget. It's got to get 50 miles per gallon. It's got to last forever. And I don't want to put springs in it, and all that's got. It has to have an NSR cam for it. If you pull pistons from an old engine and the top rings are all about in the same place, do you mean that they're aimed the same, or you mean all of them in all the cylinders are the same? But we don't know where they started. Oh, Casey, your dog got a squirrel today? Yeah, my dogs do like to chase squirrels, and they tried chasing deer too. We go up and hike, and so they can run around and up in the hills and be dogs, and so they try to find squirrels and turkeys, and there's deer up there occasionally. Central California is in the house. People expect too much to build a motor. I'm just happy when they run. That's why I like wrecking yard motors so much, because they were already kind of alive. Dan, the four-legged ones. Daniel, I saw the guy doing the multiple LS heads on the six cylinder. Aaron, I do have a 429. I don't have one. Mark Sanchez has one that he'll let me borrow. Do they have a turkey season? I'm sure that they do. I've actually never been turkey hunting. We have a bunch of them at the ranch that we used to have. They're all over. Wes, thanks for answering about the AFR heads. Max flow times 2 equals maximum NA power. But as we showed in the Ford video, we went to 2.4. So that's not really the maximum. It just takes a lot of motor to do that. 125 horsepower with the nitrous just adds to what's there. The cylinder head doesn't care about that, not at that level. If you try to add a lot more nitrous, then you'd start running into problems. But a 125 shot is going to be simple on that. Yeah, the 40 horsepower piston flip. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Wow, Dan, that's good. Got those uncle jokes. It's getting tougher to find 5-liter Explorer engines in Salvo Yard. Have I been talking about those too much? Larry, is it true the original 01 was balanced at 15,000 RPM in development? I don't know. I would want to believe that. I want that to be true. Working on a 2001 5.3 LS swap for my 49 3600 Chevy. Went with Truck Norris and got good information from the video. Great, I'm happy to help. Have you ever thought about getting a Mercedes V12 or BMW V12? Yes, I like both of those, but again, it's just hard to get them to work. Yeah, William, look at the modular Ford SUVs and look for the aviators, and there might be something else that had the actuators on them. The 4.6 2-valve trucks, those composite intake manifolds also had actuators on them. I don't know if I've tested an Edelbrock Street Master intake. Oh, wow, Dan. Mark, I don't think you'd get to 18-1. That's really difficult. It's easier with bigger displacement, but you run into, at a certain compression ratio, you start running into a battle between, what is it, thermal efficiency and one of the other efficiencies. They start canceling each other out, so you don't really get much of a gain. Okay, one more question. Yeah, hit the thumbs up. We're just a little, we're over 50%. No, Casey, you're not supposed to ask that question. You're used to say, what are your thoughts on the sky being blue? Blue sky thoughts. Mike, because the reason I put up with you is because I'm one of you. You think I don't ask dumb questions? aftermarket EFI is causing fires. There you go. There you go, Casey. That's much better. That's what we like to see. Thoughts. Deep thoughts. I'm just excited that my fan has a remote. And I feel like now I'm high tech and I even know how to program it. And by program, I mean I pulled out the little thing that stopped the battery from connecting. But look, it works. Yeah, what's up? Boom. It's a great world we live in. Yep. What is your quest? What is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color? What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? African or European? I'm not sure. Did all my cars make the move? My truck did, which the air conditioning is now out in, which I'm not looking forward to driving down to Westek with no AC. That's not going to be fun. And the Omni did. I did steal my fan back because I'm the sugar daddy. No red top. Just I haven't. I need to have my kids sit down and watch that. I watched it last night because they were wanting to watch. At least my youngest one was wanting to watch scary movies. So he's been watching the Halloween kind of series, and so now we had him watch the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And I only wanted to do that because my wife is terrified of that. But I only wanted him to watch that. I just wanted him to watch Freddy versus Jason. But he has to have the backstory before he watches Freddy versus Jason, because that's just classic. Oh, I'm familiar with all the Evil Deads. And the TV series. Shop smart. Shop smart. Strange brew. If you follow your 12-point maintenance plan, we'd have to have jump starts, eh? It's my boomstick. Give me some sugar, baby. Nash. Awesome stuff. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up on this wonderful Monday. I hope you've taken a look at the video that I just posted on all the 5-liter Ford, making the most power ever with a stock small block Ford head. I don't even know that that's the case, but I haven't seen one that's more than that, and so I want to see that. So now I need to go down the rabbit hole a little bit and see if there's something out there that made more power than that. Why somebody would want to put that head on something that's way more motor than it deserves, because that's what I did. But I want to see if somebody stepped up their game a little bit. So we'll see what happens. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.